Good evening, Phoenixville. It's so nice to see so many people out on a Thursday evening, and a misty Thursday evening as it is, so we'll try to keep the program going so you can see the rest of the Eagles game that's on tonight. Welcome to the Mayoral Forum, and also welcome to St. Peter's Church. We're very happy to provide this space to the community. We consider ourselves to be a neighborhood church, not only the neighborhood of Church Street, but for the wider Phoenixville community. We serve daily free lunch for people who are in need, and also we have a food pantry. And we also share the space with other community groups. So welcome, I'm so glad that you're here, and I hope that today's forum is very informative and you're able to get some questions answered. So welcome once again, and now I would like to introduce Gwen Hagee from Diversity in Action.
Thank you. I've been a resident of Phoenixville for 27 years, and I'm the current chair of Diversity in Action, Phoenixville. We're delighted tonight to support this wonderful initiative of the Town Watch of Phoenixville to bring the community together with our three candidates for mayor of Phoenixville. Diversity in Action was founded 15 years ago to promote racial and social justice, healing, and reconciliation. We hold dialogue circles in the community to build bridges and find common ground on the issues that divide us. So stop by our table to learn a little bit more about us and pick up a flyer for our multicultural festival that's coming up in November. How wonderful that we can come together here tonight in the spirit of democracy to gather information to make informed decisions as we cast our vote for mayor in November's election. I thank Town Watch and Ginger Murphy for pulling this all together and making this event possible for our community. Our three candidates for their willingness and openness to participate. Our very talented and dedicated community leader, Lou Beccaria, who has very graciously agreed to be our moderator this evening, and to Reverend Koshi Matthews and all the congregation of St. Peter's Episcopal Church. They work so diligently all year on issues of social and economic justice, and how nice of them to host us this evening. We welcome the Phoenix Media Group who are videotaping this event tonight, and welcome to all of you, and thank you for coming out. And I'm very happy now to introduce Ginger Murphy of the Town Watch.
Thank you so much, Gwen, and welcome everybody. It's so exciting to see a room full of people. This idea started as a conversation at a Town Watch meeting when we were thinking about, so the mission, of course, of Town Watch is it's a group of residents here in Phoenixville and business owners too, banding together to think about and take action around what is going to make our community safer and healthier. And we thought one of the things that we could do is to provide a forum for people to come out and learn about our three candidates who we're lucky to have here so that we can cast informed votes for the leadership of our town. So very, very exciting to us. And as Gwen said, I just want to add, this forum tonight is brought to you by the collaboration of several organizations, which she has mentioned, Town Watch and Diversity in Action, as well as St. Peter's Church. And I just want to acknowledge that when the community comes together, some really exciting things can happen. So you're all part of that tonight. And I have been asked to read a few housekeeping notes before I introduce our moderator, Dr. Beccaria. This evening's debate is being videotaped for future broadcast on a variety of local TV and social media outlets leading up to Election Day. We will have 3 rounds of 2 questions for each of the candidates, with a 5-second break between rounds for TV purposes. There is a paper on everyone's chair, which hopefully you saw, detailing the TV distribution. So for those of you whose friends are not here tonight who also want to be informed voters, you can direct them to also take advantage of this forum. Also on that paper is a place for all of you in the audience to write a question for a candidate. Please submit your questions to us by the end of the second round, and we will have Dr. Beccaria read your questions for the candidates to answer at the end of the debate. And I'm going to have this bright orange basket in the back for you. If during the proceedings you think of something, look for me in the basket and have them in by the end of the second round. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Lou Beccaria, who I have seen at pancake breakfasts and in the community weeding and picking up trash in all variety of places. But for a more formal introduction, Lou has over 46 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, which we benefit from in the Phoenixville community, spanning the fields of criminal justice, higher education, health, and human services. Nearly 30 of these years has been in the grant-making side of philanthropy as a foundation executive, consultant, and adjunct university professor. Lou is the founding CEO of the Phoenixville Community Health Foundation, joining the foundation in September 1998. So we are very, very lucky to have you, Lou. And with no further ado, I will turn the program over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight and exercising our democracy in action here. We really appreciate your coming out. So let me introduce to you the three candidates. Peter Uschler, who is the candidate representing the Democratic Party. David Gautreaux, candidate representing the Republican Party. And Nate Craig, candidate representing the Green Party. This forum tonight is organized as an opportunity for borough citizens to hear from these three candidates for the mayor's position and their stance on various issues of importance in the borough. Tonight's format will not be that of a formal debate, but rather that of a more informal discourse that allows you, our borough citizens, to hear the thoughts, the values, and the political philosophies of the three candidates. The questions posed to each candidate will relate to present civic issues going on in the borough. The questions have been developed by me in conjunction with the forum sponsors, Diversity in Action and Phoenixville Town Watch. The candidates have had access to the questions beforehand in order to be able to prepare for tonight's forum. So let me explain a little bit what I call rules of the road for tonight. We'll try to maintain a spirit of relative informality and dignity throughout the evening. While it will be my job to keep the program on schedule, reasonably close to the time allotment, which is 90 minutes, I will encourage the candidates to speak to the questions posed to them as fully as possible, given the time permitted. In an event such as this tonight, partisan emotions can overcome careful and thoughtful political dialogue. We ask that the candidates maintain the focus on the issues that befits the purpose of this event. I would respectfully ask that the audience, as well, maintain a decorum befitting this exercise in civic education. Each candidate, as was mentioned before, will have 3 minutes to answer each question posed to him. We will have 3 rounds of 2 questions for each of the candidates. Each candidate then will have a total of 6 questions posed to them. Okay, let's begin. Mr. Craig, I'd like to ask you, as the supervisor of the borough's police department, how can the mayor best support the police department in helping it make our community a safer community?
That's a great question, Lou. The mayor's role, as you said, is to supervise the activities of the police department. One of the ways that I would help to engage the community with the police department is to focus on opportunities for the police to explain what it's like to be an officer, somebody trying to engage the community and keep it safe. It's very difficult sometimes for the community to understand what it's like to be on the beat. So as they're driving around, just being able to explain what it is that an officer does, so that there's communication between officers and the community at large.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gautreaux, do you feel that our police department has adequate resources to address the ever-changing needs of our growing community? If not, what additional resources, including policies, would you advocate for?
Sure. As a former council member, of course, we always have to be fiscally responsible. I mean, the easy answer is get us 6 more police officers. But I can tell you from sitting there, about 70% of the borough budget's for the police department. So council, of course, has to do their due diligence and just can't go out and hire 6 officers. One of the things that we talked about when I was on council, and it's always a hot issue, was possibly a canine officer with the drug issues in town. We also have use of that kind of officer available from other municipalities. This is going to sound very strange what I'm going to say, but I found some information. I called Lancaster City. They actually use rabbits, believe it or not. It sounds ridiculous, but I called and they said it actually works on the drug dealer thing, and it's actually working. So obviously, if I'm the successful candidate, I'd want to have a meeting with myself and the chief. He said they currently have 4 rabbit sniffing for drugs, and they're about 1,500 apiece. So as ridiculous as it sounds, that's something that we should explore. You got to think outside the box. One of the other things with constant traffic, we know downtown with traffic issues, whether it's rush hour, whether it's food truck festivals, we know what Star Street and Bridge Street can be like. I would advocate going to local businesses and possibly to give them the tools to do their job better. I mean, Mayor Speck and Council just recently gave the police force drones. A drone to use in dangerous situations. What I would advocate is go to local business and get them to underwrite like a John Deere Gator, for instance, so that the police officers can use, with traffic jams, get to a place as fast as they can. And of course, as time goes on and we keep growing as a borough, it's very important that we keep other officers on the radar, and go to council and see if we, can get another officer or 2.
Okay, thank you very much. Very creative answers. Mr. Ursula, do you believe that our police department is diverse enough in age, race, and gender? If not, how best could the improvement be made in this area?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lou. So we, of course, as a community have challenges that our police force should and must represent the citizens of our diverse community. And so one of the areas we really have to think about and understand is systemically, why do we maybe not have candidates of specific backgrounds? And so when you look at our police force, you have to essentially you have to look at and understand why systemically people may not be applying for these specific roles. In Phoenixville, we're very fortunate to have a strong community police force, and through the strength of that police force, I think we are getting more community engagement. But as my other candidates have said up here, we have to really start to look at how we engage the community more, and also open up the eyes of many of our citizens to see how they can be involved with the community, the police force, and also how they may actually maybe one day join the police force if we have young people who would have an interest.
Okay, thank you. Going back to Mr. Craig, what role do you see our mayor playing in promoting positive relations between the community and our police department, especially our youth?
So one of the things that I would love to see is, as I've talked to Chief Sostrom about this, he's also mentioned that he's interested in considering the possibilities of opening up a program that would look sort of like a young officers training program. So in other words, young people who had interest could spend either a summer camp type of scenario, or they would be able to, on a monthly basis, sit down with officers and see what basically get training, pre-training for not what it would look like if they were in the academy, but a young training academy for people who had interest. That you'd be able to focus on diverse populations as well as women as well. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Gautreaux, some aspects of the mayor's role are largely ceremonial. How do you see playing out these ceremonial aspects of the role?
Sure. I'm going to throw former Mayor Scott under the bus briefly, but it's in a good way. When I was on Borough Council, and Mike can attest this as council member, we'd be there about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and after a long meeting, it would come time for the mayor's report. And Dana Dugan, we'd all sigh because we knew Leo would put a 20-minute show on. That was a good thing because Leo was out and about in the community constantly. There's a reason why this gentleman was a mayor for 16 years. I think it's important for a mayor to be part of the community, not just as being in charge of the police department, but to attend, church bazaars, banquets, and I like to eat, so I'll go to all those banquets for sure. But, it's important, and that's something that Leo did very well, and I would like to follow in those footsteps. I think it's important to be out and about and let the community know that you're the ambassador for the town, and when they see you, they think Phoenixville, and it makes them feel proud. But thank you, Leo, for 16 years of service.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ursula, are there any aspects of community policing that you feel are presently missing from the way in which it is practiced here in the borough?
I personally believe we're very fortunate that our police force is extremely dedicated. They have become increasingly involved in the community. And really, when you talk to the police force and you understand their role and their job, it's not through technology or it's not through finances that solve crimes or help to keep our community safe, but it's really through relationships. And relationships with individuals in the community, relationships with organizations in the community. That is really how we create and maintain a strong community police force. We are fortunate, though, I believe, to have already a very strong community police force that we can continue to grow upon.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that's the end of our questions for round one, and we'll be back in just a few moments with round two. Welcome back to round two of the 2017 Mayoral Candidates Public Forum here in Phoenixville. Okay, let's start off, Nate, again. If you were to be elected mayor, how would you envision collaborating with community groups like Phoenixville Town Watch, Diversity in Action, and the Phoenixville Social Concerns Committee, for example, to name a few, to create a safer and a more socially just community?
It's a great question, and one of the things I would love to see the borough do and the police department do is to have quarterly meetings, like every 3 or 4 months, to meet with groups like the Town Watch, groups like Diversity in Action, who have questions about things like how are police officers hired, what is the process, what can we do to increase diversity on the police force. With Town Watch, what are things that Town Watch can be doing to improve what they do, and so to have time for local groups to set up meetings with the police department, so that there can be a back and forth dialogue, so that it's not just we think we're doing it right, but that we're actually spending time finding out, well, how are we doing? What can we do better? And sure, we could definitely do that. Just taking a more proactive approach to community engagement.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Gokcho. Crime associated with opioid addiction is in the national headlines, as we know, and also in our local headlines as well. What measures would you support as mayor to address this growing epidemic?
Sure. A lot of people hear it in the news and they know it's bad, but being a former member of the fire department board, I get a lot of the fire calls on my phone. Whenever there's a cardiac arrest call, they call out the fire department to assist the ambulance. We probably get 5 or 6 a month: cardiac arrest, patient not breathing, possible heroin overdose. It's an epidemic. We know it's nationally and locally it is as well. I think we as a community, one of my platforms is to start an actual drug task force with users, former users, parents, faith members, community members, school members, everyone from different diverse backgrounds. And the reason why is to all put our heads together. We know we can't stop it completely, but it's important as a community we look at these individuals. They're not bad people. I think the image out there is these people are junkies and they deserve it. That's not true at all. The people that are addicted is because they were taking off these prescription medications. They went on to heroin because it was a cheap fix for their pain that they have and the agony. So I think we as a community need to reach out to them and know we're there for them and try to help them through the situations. And that's one of my major platforms, is to reach out and do whatever we can and try to be a leader in the Chester County to try to do whatever we can.
Thank you. Mr. Urschler, as the supervisor of the borough's police department, how can the mayor best support the police department in helping make it a safer community?
Absolutely. The mayor can best support the police department by being a strong communicator. At the end of the day, our police force are the law enforcement professionals. They are the individuals who have dedicated their lives to serving this community. But what the mayor can do, and what I feel I have the best qualifications to do, are really to bring the community together, to be the person who will bring people of all different backgrounds, of all different interests, all different organizations together so that we can work on large, challenging issues that we have here in our community. We have a lot of very wonderful things that we as a community have focused on. We're a very caring community. We have a lot of great nonprofits. But we do have challenges, and we need to come together as a community, erase the divisions that exist between us, and start to work together so that we can start to overcome as a group of people. And most importantly, a mayor must consider what they put into the world, what kind of communication they put out into the world and how it's perceived, whether it be meaning, whether they intend it to be or whether they didn't intend it to be. We must be cautious of the communications that we put out, because not only is it reflective of our community, but the lives of the men and women who serve our police force depend on it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Mr. Craig, what is your vision for our community as a whole over the next 5 years?
So over the next 5 years, we've got a lot of really excellent opportunities. Phoenixville Borough was the first borough in the state of Pennsylvania to adopt the Ready for 100 resolution. Now, as you know, resolutions, there were some really good aspects built into this resolution in terms of charting progress along the way. But it could happen that we could have just done that resolution and move on without actually following through. I'm going to be, as mayor, I would be the cheerleader of all of our renewable energy incentives. I would love to see us follow through on our Ready for 100 pledge and meet those deadlines that we've set for ourselves, that Borough Council set for us. Another major aspect, the second biggest part of my vision is to make local government more accessible. For people to want to get involved and have to sift through committee meeting minutes and then find out if the committee action ever went to Borough Council, and it's very cumbersome, it's very difficult to navigate. There are much easier tools, there's technology that already exists that we could simply implement to make it so that if you're interested in parking, you'd be notified whenever it's in a committee or whether it's in front of Borough Council. If environmental or renewable energy is something that's particularly pressing for you, you would be able to get a notification. So just making local government more accessible is something we could definitely achieve over the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Gautreaux, what are the top 3 issues that you see facing our Phoenixville Police Department over the next 5 years?
Well, the one, as I mentioned before, is going to be lack of officers. As we continue to grow, it's going to be important for myself and council to, if I'm selected, to look at adding officers. And again, it's a cost issue. So I think that's going to be a challenge. So I see in the next 3 years, definitely not having enough officers for the size of our town will be an issue. I think is coming into town, we're going to start seeing more violent calls the officers will be getting. And just the volume of calls. I think it was 108 calls between October 5th and 8th that our police officers had to respond to. And that, now, I think that was an unusual circumstance. But it just shows you, as we continue to grow as a town and a borough, that we have to be aware of these situations. And we're going to have to react, to an ever-growing community.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Urschler, What role do you see our mayor playing in promoting positive community relations between the community and the police department, especially our youth?
Absolutely. We really, as a mayor, you have to be the person who brings people to the table. You bring the youth to the table, you bring the organizations to the table. We need to be able to be open and transparent, and we need to be approachable. We need to be open to all people of all backgrounds and interests who are constituents within our community. We must also remember there are individuals within our community who aren't just voters. So we have a very strong business community. And although they may not vote, they are a major constituency that we must be involved with. And as I said in the beginning, really, at the end of the day, what differentiates a community police force is its ability to have a strong relationship with the citizens of the town. And in that relationship, that's where we can work together to overcome our challenges. That's where we can celebrate what we've done well. And that's where we can really help to solve some of the larger problems.
Okay, thank you. Well, that completes round 2. We're going to take a break for a few minutes, and we will be back shortly with round 3. Welcome back to the 2017 Mayoral Public Forum, Mayoral Candidates Public Forum, and we are about to start round 3. Again, let's start with Mr. Craig. Mr. Craig, are there any aspects of community policing that you feel are presently missing from the way in which it is practiced here in the borough?
So one of the things that we already do, and I'd love to see more of, is we have a really strong bike patrol. That's an excellent way for, instead of just sitting in a cruiser where there's a distance, there's a physical barrier between you and the community, to be on a bike, people can stop and like, hey, do you know where Molly McGuire's is? Not that anyone doesn't, but just giving people, giving people directions, giving people, personally interacting. It's also just great for officers' health. So I'd love to see a little bit more, bike police. We've already got, I think, 10 or 12 bike units when in the department. So just making sure that we make good use of those resources. They're not cheap, but they're definitely worth it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Craig. Mr. Gautreaux, what leadership qualities are needed at this point in our borough's time from the mayor's position?
Again, going back to, I think, being a leader, you have to obviously get along with the chief. I mean, that's step number 1. But I think it's important to be a listener. When you meet with the chief, and I would plan to do that at least on a weekly basis, go over any concerns he has, listen to his concerns. If anything has to go back to council for their direction, I certainly would. But I think it's important for a leader to also be out and about in the community. Again, going back to that community sense. And, reaching out to other municipalities, reaching out to the county. We don't always have to try to do things ourselves. We can reach out to the county and other municipalities for assistance. So I think a leader would do that. I wouldn't expect the chief to do it all, but I'd be there to help him through those situations. So.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Ursuler? Crime associated with opioid addiction is in the national headlines and our own local headlines. What measures would you support as mayor to address this growing epidemic?
Thank you so much. Most important is that we overcome the stigma associated with opioid and heroin addiction, and addiction in general. Addiction is a medical illness, and through, of course, all of my research, through the CDC, also attending numerous events put on through the Chester County School of Government, you can see the challenges that we as a community are facing, and it is blind to economic status, educational level, and what we need to do as a community is embrace individuals who need help. We need to be a place where individuals and families who are struggling with opioids and heroin, addiction, alcoholism, any challenges, they can feel comfortable to come forward, they can feel supported, and we can start to work together as a community to make these things go away and to resolve them. These are huge problems. They're not going to be easily overcome by just one element. It's not just an issue with prescriptions. It's not just an issue with law enforcement, but it will take legal action, legislation. It will take members of the medical community understanding prescription habits, and it will also take nonprofits and government entities within Phoenixville coming together and understanding where we all play a role in breaking the cycle of addiction.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Craig, many candidates for public office have an agenda of items that they would consider a priority for them to accomplish during their time in office. What are your priorities?
So, as I mentioned before, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it an agenda. It's just more the direction Phoenixville is already heading. I would love to join Phoenixville and continue to lead Phoenixville forward. Like I said, we just adopted the Ready for 100 resolution. That's something that would be, I guess if you want to call it an agenda, that would be on my agenda to make sure that we continue on that track. When it comes to the parking issue, it's the number 2 question I get. Well, what are you going to do about parking? I'm like, well, it's a weak mayor system, so I wouldn't be able to legislate anything. But what I would be able to do is to advocate for a permanent standing parking committee, because these issues are not going to be solved in one shot. They're going to be, it's an ongoing problem, and as Phoenixville grows, it's going to continue to mutate and change. So to have a permanent committee that can address these issues on an ongoing basis and make recommendations to Borough Council would be a great step forward for a lot of Phoenixville residents. Again, if we're going to call it an agenda item, that's fine. I want people to be able to have access to the local government and what's going on. It's difficult to get through, and it's easy to implement technology that would just make it so much easier and so much better for people to know what's going on in their local government. So that would be, I guess, an agenda if you want one.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gautreaux, in order to be a healthy community, a community needs to be safe from a fire and from emergency medical response standpoint, as well as being safe from crime and drugs and violence. What is your assessment of how healthy our community is regarding fire safety and emergency medical response? What improvements would you like to see, if any?
Yeah. When I first got on Borough Council, Henry Wagner at the time, the president asked me if I'd be fire department liaison. It ended up being one of the best things I was ever asked to do. I never knew much about the fire department, but once I became the fire department liaison, right away the chief and the 2 assistants came to me and says, we got big problems. Volunteerism was down. We had multiple locations. We just weren't doing things feasible. So myself, Mayor Speck, who was a councilman at the time, we got together, we got a committee, and we for about a year and a half, brainstormed on ways to get things better in the fire department. We ultimately came to one location right up the street here on Church Street. And right now, the fire department is housed in one location, and we have trap ambulance who's there 24/7 as well. So being in one location is also good because it brings all the volunteers together. And we're blessed to have 2 full-time firemen. We also have, through council's blessing, a lot of part-time firemen too. We have about 45 active volunteers, and that's the backbone of our fire department. Without them, you think a police department budget's high, have a complete, full paid fire department. So it's important for us to do retention and recruitment, with the volunteers the best we can. So we got to continue in that approach. There's a thing called a SAFERS grant. What happens is when insurance companies want to do business in Pennsylvania, they have to put money into a pot in Harrisburg, and then that money is divvied out to the fire departments based on the number of calls these volunteers go on. And when I was on the fire department board, it'd be kind of nice to be there certain nights and see them handing out checks for $500, $600. But again, these are volunteers that put a lot of time in. And I believe Councilman Kuznar has approached the other council folks about maybe having the borough start kicking in some other monies to try to get more volunteerism in the community. But I think as a whole, the council's also looking to do fire department. And, that building up the street's tired. It's serving its purpose, but having a new state-of-the-art facility with training facility is definitely going to make for a healthier community. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Ursuline, what are the top 3 issues that you see facing our Phoenixville Police Department over the next 5 years?
So first and foremost would, of course, be manpower. And as the other candidates have said, the biggest challenge will be balancing that and balancing our need and the size of the police force along with the financial resources that are available and would need to be made available in order to increase the size should it be needed. So it will be a delicate balancing act for some period in time. In addition to that, maintenance is another challenge. Maintaining the equipment that we have, maintaining the technologies that we have. There are a lot of amazing law enforcement technologies out there, but they're very expensive. And so we really need to look and see what can help our first responders, our police officers, to do their job more efficiently. We need to look into programs where we can help to create additional efficiencies through technologies, but we have to balance that against the cost of those technologies. And the final piece, of course, would be the involvement of the community, understanding how the community can be involved in our police force, how they can raise funds and help to support the police force. And those are all things, if you look this year, the VFW donated over $12,000 to support the police force. And last year, I believe they actually supported the police force through the donation of bulletproof vests. So it's the need of community organizations and community leaders and individuals coming forward to take an active role to understand what our police force does and also how they can best support them.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Well, that completes the third round, and we are now going to have questions from the audience, and then after we're finished with the questions from the audience, we will actually have closing comments by each of the candidates, okay? Okay, hopefully I can read the writing here. This question is from Dave Meadows. This is for all three candidates. Okay. What is your position on timely release to the public of serious crime information so that the citizens are aware and can be defensive and have defensive actions? Also, a periodic release, weekly or monthly, of all the categories of crime to the public. All we are hearing about are the minor bar-related crimes. 2 weeks ago, the police department informed the public about a shooting and warning and picture of the armed and dangerous person on the loose 30 days after the crime occurs. So, who would like to go first to answer that?
So that was a unique and devastating event that happened in our town. There was a homicide. It was the second homicide in, recent history since that I'm aware of ever. So one of the things that at Temple University, if you either are a student at Temple University or if you work at Temple University, you will get text notifications anytime that there is an event at Temple University. You're getting like 3 or 4 a day, whether there's a shooting or any dangerous incident where you need to avoid a certain area, and then they'll tell you when it's clear. So the technology certainly exists. In terms of the cost of implementing that technology, that's something that I would be interested in pursuing and figuring out the details of. But I mean, the technology exists. It's not, once a shooting or something devastating, not that we're going to be dealing with that anytime soon, we hope. Anytime there's a dangerous situation, we would be able to be notified. So I think that would be one solution to the problem.
Okay, Mr. Gautreaux?
I'm all for about transparency. I think it's important to put that out immediately to the public if it's ready to be put out. The situation at the Prima, I think, is the one I think Mr. Meadows was referring to. Possibly didn't know he was the actual suspect at the time. I'm assuming there was a reason why it wasn't put out immediately. But, with the police blotters, you don't have to put out because people are innocent of proven guilty. So I don't think it's our job to put everyone's name in there, but to keep it generic in nature. But I'm all about transparency, and I think our public needs to know about every crime as soon as it's able to be put out legally, if we know something occurred. But I can only assume that that's why that name was not put out. I don't know for sure, but that might be why the delay occurred.
Okay, good. Mr. Ursuler?
Communication is a delicate balance, but the most important thing that we can do is communicate. And so my professional role prior to starting a business was as a director of communications for a large an international financial services firm. And one of the things that you realize is that you have to balance the need to disseminate information along with the ability to have as much information as possible. When you look at a legal situation or a police-related situation, you have to also take into consideration what investigation may be taking place. That investigation may take some period in time. That's one of the reasons that we also have to be extremely cautious about sharing information in regards to deaths in the community, for example. If a death occurs, for example, because of a drug-related issue, oftentimes the police will be spending a period in time trying to use all the communication devices of that individual who died to try to track down the source of those drugs. And so you have to balance investigation with our need for timely information. In addition to that balance, you have to balance the types of communication methods and methodologies that you use. We could have a reverse 911 system, but I think all of us would stop paying attention on the 10th 911 reverse 911 call today. But we need to understand how we use reverse 911 systems, how we use systems that are available to us through the county, which actually has a reverse 911 system, and a smart 911 system, which can actually help you if you have medical ailments. Basically, a first responder can actually figure it out before they arrive. But then we also have to look at communications as in email, communications through social media, and figure out what type of communication is best in what method. But we do also need to advise business owners and the public on what we can do in specific situations, especially where you might have an individual who is armed. How do you release that information without necessarily not jeopardizing an investigation? And so safety balanced with timeliness and type of communication.
Okay, very thorough answer. Okay, this question is, I hope I don't mispronounce the name. Is it Lauren or Larkin?
It's Larkin.
Larkin. Larkin Wright Kennedy is the person who posed the question. And again, it is to all the candidates. How would you ensure the safety of Phoenixville's most vulnerable residents, specifically people who have immigrated here seeking opportunity?
My grandfather immigrated to the United States back in 1918. He was sent back twice because he looked too Irish. He had the wrong clothes on. They sent him back, and then they sent him back again. And he wanted to be in America. And so he decided he was going to come to America. So on the third try, they let him in through Ellis Island. And when I hear stories of kids being afraid to go to school because they're not sure that they have protection from the federal government who's failed them, who's failed to protect them, it breaks my heart. And I think about all the parents who just want their kids to get an education, but they're afraid to send their kids to school and they're afraid to go to work. It's absolutely devastating what we're doing to our immigrant community, and we must, as a community, decide from the top down and from the bottom up that we are going to protect every single one of our neighbors. And if we don't do that, then we can't call ourselves a moral society. We can't call ourselves a moral town. We have to protect all of our neighbors. And if we fail in that, then we fail.
Thank you. Mr. Gautreaux?
I'm fortunate that over the years I made my first love in this town, was second love, my wife's my first love, helping a lot of nonprofits. That's become my thing that I love doing. Whether when I was president of PAX, I was in the Rotary Club. Most recently, I'm a founding member and president of Anne's Heart. When immigrants come in, we don't ask them, are you documented or undocumented? We just help them. That's our job, to be part of these nonprofits and help them out. So, and that's what we do. We welcome them with open arms. If they have a need, whether it's the lunch program here at St. Peter's, we help them. And that's what, as a community, we should do. I mean, we'd be here all night if we want to get into what our government should do and not do. It's a long subject, and everybody has their views on it. But I think we as a community, while they're here, and we welcome them, and we just, do anything we can to assist them.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ursuler?
So I'm fortunate to be a first-generation American, and my family, of course, was very fortunate to have the means and the resources to apply and receive citizenship through legal channels, which took quite a lot of time. And I've had many relatives from the Philippines who have never actually been able to visit us here in the United States because they've never even been granted visitor visas. It's a challenge. We need to understand what kind of pathway to citizenship we have available. Specifically here in Phoenixville, if you look at the history of our community, the Native American tribe that lived here was one of the few in the country to actually welcome Western settlers. And so as a community, we have always been an opening and encouraging place. I'm very supportive of the policies that our police department currently have in place when it comes to the matter of undocumented individuals, and also helping them, essentially, if they are not violent offenders, by not necessarily pursuing anything further. So I would encourage that those policies stay in place, and that every person in the Phoenixville community be given the opportunity to provide what they can back to our community, and to live peacefully and with the human dignity that each of us should be guaranteed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the next question is from Julia Rash, and it is also directed to all the candidates. What can be done, in your opinion, to deal with the challenge of parking on First Avenue? And no doubt, I'm just reading what it's written here, folks. And no doubt other avenues and streets as well. Forge Theater works hard to discourage the can't make out this, the patrons, I guess, from parking on First Avenue, but to no avail. Nate?
Again, so one of my agenda items again was just to to create a permanent standing parking committee. First Avenue is an area where, you know, there's a lot of congestion. It's difficult to park. It's not the only place in Phoenixville, and I can tell you that because I've knocked on doors in every part of Phoenixville. And it's the number 2 question I get: what are you going to do about parking? Again, this is not something I could legislate, but it's something I could strongly encourage Borough Council to act on. It's something I could organize residents around, is to create a permanent standing parking committee to deal with the issues as they come up, and to not just wait until there's an entire block that's just ready to riot. You know, there are more proactive ways to address it, and I'd love to see the creation of a permanent parking committee.
Okay, Mr. Goto?
Yeah, my son, I'm going to call him out. We went to Boston a few years ago, and he went on the, am I saying, is it a rickshaw? Is that what they call that? He wants to start a rickshaw business here in town, so maybe he could be a young entrepreneur and take people where they can get better accessibility to parking. But in all seriousness, I think Nate brings up a good point. You know, the old days, I think people had one car. You know, now you have people, everyone has their own car in the household. That's just how it is. And the streets are just getting more crowded, and we're growing as a borough, and it is frustrating. The people on the avenues from downtown, basically all the way to probably 4th or 5th, it's very difficult for these people to find, you know, parking in front of their homes. You know, whether we come up with shuttle services, I mean, we have to think outside the box with all these problems. But in a way, we've created a good monster that everybody wants to be here, but I can imagine how frustrating it is for those individuals. When I was on council, you know, we came up with the parking permit, you know, thing for the people so that it'd be guaranteed spots. But then when they get company or visitors, it's, you know, embarrassing when they have to tell the people to park 10 blocks away to come for their Thanksgiving dinner. So it is a problem, and I don't know what the answer is, but it's something that we certainly should keep our ears and eyes open and try to figure out a plan.
Okay, Mr. Ozer?
It's parking, I think, is one of those challenges that faces everyone, and almost every city that grows at the same pace Phoenixville has. And we have to be creative, as the other candidates have said, and look at solutions that can be meaningful and long-term. So can we encourage more people to walk? Can we make sure that we're enforcing policies that are already in place? When you look at the information that's being, you know, coming through Borough Council in this last year, you look at at the parking, the parking feasibility study. You look at the plans that have already been presented for the new firehouse, or not the new firehouse, but for 5 different locations for the potential firehouse. You start to look and understand the challenges of creating parking structures. And then you ask yourself, where's the balance of finance versus the balance of need? Is our parking problem a daily problem, or is it a weekend issue? Is that an issue during festivals? How do we better enforce the policies we already have? How do we make sure people have the permits and they're able to park where their permit does allow them to park? And we kind of have to work together as a community, essentially, to overcome this. At the end of the day, it's all about balance. There's no way to wave the magic wand and hope that it can solve all of our parking problems. We also need to look at public transportation. And in public transportation, there's of course a balance to people using public transportation today versus what the needs may be in the future. And if we had better public transportation, would we have the ability to use it? And you balance that all against the whole concept of people's jobs are changing, how people travel and commute are changing, the times that people travel are changing. And then that's where you have to start to look towards a solution. But I would say we are already looking at solutions and trying to find, as a community, what is the correct balance in that.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, the next question is from Steve B., and this one is directed to Mr. Gautreaux. What do you think is the #1 issue facing retail businesses in the borough?
Sure. Was it 2 days ago, I went down to Sage for, I'll talk about the restaurants first, down at Sage, and they told me with the food truck festival, I asked them how business was on a Saturday night, and they said it was dead. Nobody came in their place. So a lot of restaurants, as far as the retail downtown, those kind of festivals, they seem to say hurts them. Now, it's good for the borough because it gets people into the borough, but then it's not good for the business. I used to approach Manny Demutis all the time and say, when Phoenixville was really starting to prosper, I think we need specialty retail in the town, like a Trader Joe's or something like that. We actually approached them to see if they'd be interested in coming to town. They weren't. They have certain demographics they like to follow. But I think you need certain demographics like that and stores like that to get people to come into town, because when they're in town, they'll go eat at a certain restaurant and things like that. But I was telling somebody today that we're very fortunate in this town to have 2 downtowns. We have the Nut Road corridor and we have the Bridge Street corridor. And, we always hear downtown, going back to this parking issue, it's very frustrating for the retailers to try to make it down there. But, I think there'll be solutions in the future to help everyone out.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Mike Speck. And what would be some effective ways to deal with social media? And this is directed to all the candidates. So we'll go back to you, Mr. Craig.
So social media is, it's got its ups and its downs, it's got its positives and negatives, and that's just the way it is. Like with the incident, nobody knew what was going on, nobody knew whether there was one shooter, multiple shooters the other way. Not to go back to the most negative of situations, but from the borough's perspective, I think we can do a lot better. Can you actually repeat the question? I started getting lost in my train of thought there.
What are some effective ways to deal with social media?
Effective ways in general, I think you can have a strategy overall, like what needs to be communicated from the borough, what needs to be communicated from individuals, like if it's going to be like, borough council people, like they have their own personal page, and then there could be ways to engage the community. One of the things I've talked a lot about tonight is accessible government, making government more accessible, getting information out to people. And social media is excellent at that, for just getting information about things that are happening, decisions that are being made that are going to impact people, taxes, how they're going to be affected by certain decisions that are being made by borough council, so that people will know that they're happening and then be able to show up and voice their concerns, or even just to thank borough council for the excellent job that it's doing.
Mr. Gautreaux?
Yeah. With Town Watch, about 6 months ago, I attended one of their meetings over at the Franklin Commons, and I did a check-in on my social media page while I was at the meeting. And it just shows you the power of social media. I did a check-in, and at least 6 or 7, 8 people chimed in You know, some said, I wish you knew what was going on, how long you're going to be there, we'd love to stop by, which is Ginger probably love to hear. So there are people in the community, so social media can be your friend. You know, if you can get people that aren't sure, you know, where meetings are, or how to get involved. So if you give people a heads up, you can invite them, and it's a good tool like that. If I am chosen to be the mayor, I would reach out to somebody like Voxy Pop, for instance, who is the multimedia new person in town that's showing videos. My monthly mayor report that Leo, going back to Leo again, used to give his monthly report, I would also do it on there for people to make the meeting or watch it on TV. It'd just be another media outlet for them to be up to date on everything going on in the borough as far as the mayoral end of the house goes.
Okay, so. Thank you. Mr. Ursula?
Social media is an important tool that we have to, as a community, start to really understand and wrap our hands around. The most important thing a community can do through social media is control the narrative. And so many communities throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania have not really started to dive into social media, but we have an opportunity here as Phoenixville to kind of set that trend too and help people we need to be the ones presenting information out to the public instead of the public just talking about us on social media. And we need to think of social media as a very strong tool that we can use to get our message out through video, as both the candidates have said, messages about meetings. And at the same time, we need to use our social media to encourage people to come to the community. In order to survive our businesses in the historic downtown area, it's important to note that we have to advertise Phoenixville as a destination. We need multiple people to come into the community to bring those dollars. If you think about the Colonial Theater, on average, a person who comes to watch a movie will spend over $27 above their ticket price. So you start to think about how you use social media to promote your downtown area, how you use it to disseminate information, and also how you use it to have meaningful conversations, two-way dialogue with your citizens. And that's the power of social media. It does have a price, and there are challenges in it. In Tennessee, there was the first piece of legislative action against a community that used social media. And so we have to be cautious about how we use social media and the policies and procedures in place, especially for elected officials, because to block somebody on social media as an elected official, that is actually denying them of their First Amendment right. And as a political official, you cannot do that. You have to be open, available, and accessible.
Okay, thanks. And now for our last question. This question was submitted by Dan Dvorak. And Mr. Ursula, this one is for you. There is a property in the West End where the police show up on a weekly basis due to numerous illegal activity. Would you be willing to call in the state police to help in cleaning up this problem?
I am unfortunately not familiar specifically with the property. What I would say is that I would require, I will not tell you that as I would not go into surgery to operate on your appendix, I also will not go into law enforcement to control the way law enforcement professionals respond to specific situations. What I would tell you is specifically a situation like this, it's important that we bring it forward, and in the role of mayor, you would collaborate with our police chief and start to understand what are the options that we have available to us, and how do we best handle that situation. It appears, obviously, by the text in the question, that this is a frequent occurrence. And so we need to understand what kind of background is there before we can make a decision. It would be very difficult to make kind of a snap judgment or a decision right here with very limited knowledge. And we would need to really ensure that we're collaborating with our police force and the individuals who are trained in law enforcement and understand the legalities, as well as the balance of the comfort of the community.
Okay. Well, thank you, candidates, for answering all those questions, and thank you, audience, for the questions. And now, for the last part of the evening, we're going to have closing comments of 1 to 2 minutes by each of the candidates, and to keep with the trend that we've had throughout the night, Mr. Craig, you're first.
Well, thank you for moderating, Lou, and thank Town Watch and Diversity in Action. This has been a wonderful opportunity to hear some of the differences between me and the other candidates. One of the main reasons I'm running for mayor is because I fell in love with this town about 4 years ago, and I just wanted to be a part of where we're already going. I wanted to be a part of just helping to guide us towards renewable energy. There are some really excellent first steps that we've taken. And if we don't follow through on them, it's just going to we're just going to blow in the wind and we're going to lose it. There are a lot of things that we can continue to do to make Phoenixville more accessible to more people, to make our government more accessible to more people. And I'd love to be a part of taking those next steps. So I'll ask for your vote for November 7th, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gocher?
I'd like to do a quick shout out to my bride of 22 years, Cindy, this past Sunday, and my son, Christopher, and my family and cousins who came out tonight, but more importantly, my 93-year-old World War II hero, my dad. So, thank you. Sorry. I told both these gentlemen last week, we had a meeting with Social Concerns Committee. I told both these gentlemen that if they're the chosen mayor, I support them 100%, and they know that, and they could reach out to me for any help they want. I'm not going to go anywhere if I lose. I'm still going to be here to help the town and the nonprofits and be with the health. I'm the current chair of the Health Foundation, and I enjoy just helping the community. So I do ask for your vote, and even if I'm not your candidate, please go out and vote. It's the number one thing we can do as citizens to exercise our right. So like I said, you don't have to vote for me, but just vote. That's important. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of those who organized, to St. Peter's, to Phoenix Media Group, Lou, of course, and Diversity in Action and the Phoenixville Town Watch. I was trying to think of what is that reason, that inspiration? Why did you decide to do this? Why did you decide to run? And I'm sure at this point in time we're all probably asking ourselves. We think we're nuts too. But all I can say is that Phoenixville has done so much for me personally, so much for my family. I arrived in this area 10 years ago in 2006. I moved from Florida. I was a complete transplant. I knew nobody in this area. And I worked in a corporation, and in 2014, I finally left the corporation to start a small business, and I had the opportunity to really say, let me be more involved in the Phoenixville community. And it opened my eyes to just how amazing and unique a place that we have. I've been fortunate to live, of course, in Florida and live in London for a couple of years, and at the same time see all different types of communities around the country and around the Commonwealth. So I'm actually the president of the Pennsylvania JCs. And through that, I've been able to travel to communities throughout Pennsylvania. And when you look at other communities and you look what we have available to us here, we are a special place. We're a unique community. The mayor of the future here in Phoenixville needs to be somebody who's going to have their feet on the ground, who's going to be there to support our nonprofits, to support the different activities and events we have here in our community, which is something that I love to do. I recently was thinking back on the year since January, and even without running, I have been very actively involved through our Phoenixville JCs, through, of course, the Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership Program, which is a deep passion of mine, helping young people to really become leaders and stewards in their community. But I'd already attended over 105 events by the time we got to today, including 25 legislative visits with legislators here in Philadelphia, legislators in Harrisburg, and legislators in DC. I've been lobbying since I was a sophomore in college for student grants. 5 years ago, I started lobbying for the United Nations Foundation to help with the eradication of malaria, which is cited as the #1 threat to the armed services in the United States. We need to continue to have energy and enthusiasm, celebrating the history of this community while also starting to prepare us for a strong and beautiful future, which we have the ability to do. Phoenixville is a community of people who care, who are creative, who are excited. It's a community where we have a lot of new people moving in, and we need to embrace those individuals, help them understand what is unique about Phoenixville, how they can take an active role in our government, and in being a good steward of our community. And that's what we need to do. We need to embrace these individuals, embrace everyone who enters into the boundaries or on any one of those 46 miles of roadway that we have. Those are the individuals that the mayor and that our elected officials are responsible for. That responsibility is not to be taken lightly. It is a discipline that you must have on a day-to-day basis. And you must be able to bring people to the table, put aside their differences, and start to have real and meaningful conversations, and be open to people, be available to them, and in doing that, we will be a community. Phoenixville produced steel for years, and Phoenixville steel will never be used in walls, it will only be used in bridges, and we need to allow everyone in this community to cross those bridges together.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Ken. I think you'll agree with me that we have 3 candidates for the mayor's position who are not only very intelligent, but they're very passionate about this community and have thought deeply about all the issues that have been presented to them tonight and have given us some really good, creative and innovative answers to these questions. So again, thank you, candidates. You've done a great job. I'd also like to thank St. Peter's Episcopal Church once again for hosting this event, and also to Diversity in Action and to the Phoenixville Town Watch for sponsoring this event. And equally, I'd like to thank all of you for coming out, for engaging in this exercise in civic engagement and civic education. It's a testimony to how much the citizens of this community love the community, and it's an expression of the liberty that we enjoy here in this country. So thank you again for coming out, and good night, and have a safe trip home.